But first tonight, Peter Dutton has called on the Corruption Commission to investigate whether there was any political interference from the Albanese government in stripping Mike Pezzullo's Order of Australia. Pezzullo was the tough secretary of the Home Affairs Department when he was sacked by Anthony Albanese for engaging in political gossip with a Liberal lobbyist friend of Scott Morrison's. There was no corruption, no criminality involved. Peter Dutton today called this a vindictive move. He claimed the government was trying to seek retribution against Pezzullo, and he says the corruption agency should now investigate. Here he was on Ray Hadley.
This is a clear demonstration of political interference in the process. I actually think it's a matter for the Integrity Commission to investigate because there is no conviction against Mr Pezzullo. There's no impropriety alleged against him that would warrant the stripping of this honour, and it is nothing more than the government trying to, seek retribution against him. They passed a retrospective law to take part of his salary away or his payout, which was done to apply to him only. And I'd never seen anything like that before, and I haven't seen anything like the stripping of this award.
And Peter Dutton said the Albanese government ministers need to disclose whether they were involved in removing Pezzullo's honour, because the whole process is meant to be independent.
I'm sure that Katie Gallagher and others, frankly, need to disclose what sort of instruction they've given to the committee and what their expectation has been, because it's not a fair process, and in the end it should be, and it should be impartial and independent, and it's been anything but. If the Prime Minister believes that he can justify this, he should be out talking about why, because I think it's a matter, frankly, the government should refer to the Integrity Commission because there clearly has been interference in what is supposed to be an independent process.
I first broke the story back in March that Mike Pezzullo was set to be stripped of his Order of Australia. I could hardly believe it at the time. It was so petty, so political, so typical of the characters of some of the ministers in this Albanese government. So we're just breaking the news now that there are plans to strip Mike Pezzullo of his AO despite no corruption or criminality. This is a very rare move. Mike Pezzullo has given a lifetime of service to Australia, including stopping the boats, strengthening the borders. But now, because of his gossipy text messages with a lobbyist, he's facing having his order stripped. And now, around 7 months later, the order has officially been removed. Pezzullo was made an officer of the Order of Australia in the 2020 Queen's Birthday Honours for distinguished services to public administration through leadership roles in the areas of national security, border control and immigration, given for a lifetime of work. And that body of work can't be extinguished because of some text messages. Nothing criminal, nothing actually wrong, just a breach of the Public Service Code, according to one interpretation. As Ray Hadley pointed out today, there are many people who have fallen foul of the law, yet still hold their honours.
Well, I'll give you one prime example. There's a former TV personality in New South Wales, Andrew O'Keefe, who's had numerous convictions for violence involving violence against women. And he still enjoys being a member of the Order of Australia. And I mean, and this has been going on not just for months, but for years. And there's been no they say there's an investigation now, but they did this very quickly with Mike Pezzullo. They haven't been quite as quick with someone who's been before the courts and convicted on numerous occasions.
Now, Pezzullo was apolitical. He's worked for both sides of politics. He was responsible for setting up the Home Affairs Super Ministry that has now been all but undone by the Albanese government. And he also played a major role in stopping the boats, also in Operation Sovereign Borders. Tony Abbott backed Pezzullo in, and he told me, when I first broke this story, that of all the senior border protection officials from September 2013, he was the one, above all, who was convinced that the boats both could and should be stopped. In my view, his departure from public service is a serious loss to our country. And former Prime Minister Scott Morrison also backed in Pezzullo, telling me at the time that no one was more deserving of recognition in our honours system as a public servant than Mike. He's a big loss to the Australian public service. He was an important internal voice to governments of both political persuasions on protecting Australia's national security. So this is an official that both Tony Abbott and Scott Morrison say should be honoured, yet look at how Albanese treated him. The Prime Minister sacked Pezzullo in late November after a review found that his text messages with Liberal power broker Scott Briggs breached the Public Service Code through using his position to gain a benefit for himself for failing to be apolitical and engaging in disrespectful critiques of ministers. Now, the personal benefit was supposedly having a personal communication channel with senior leadership that was said not to be available to other secretaries. But as I've said before, this finding could only be made if the messages of the other departmental secretaries were checked, because some, we know, are long-term friends with ministers, lobbyists and power brokers. But it was also a farcical finding because Pezzullo already had direct contact with Turnbull and Morrison. He didn't need the back channel. So there was no personal benefit here at all. Peter Dutton has, in the past, spoken about how Pezzullo's sacking by Albanese was highly political.
Claire O'Neill's at war with her secretary at the moment. You see the review that she's just commissioned to try and white ant Mike Pezzullo, the secretary of her Home Affairs Department.
I don't think there's any question that it's political. I mean, an important point here is that there's obviously a huge battle going on at the moment between the Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill and the secretary of her department, Mike Pezzullo, who was a secretary when I was at the department. He's a first-class public servant, and I was very well served by him and by the public servants within the Department of Home Affairs.
This all matters because Pezzullo was at the helm of the Home Affairs Department, keeping us all safe. Our national security is at stake. And now Tony Burke heads up this ministry, which has overseen the fast-tracking of visas from Gaza. If there has been political interference to deliberately harm a long-serving and distinguished public servant, then Dutton's right. The Corruption Commission should investigate. This government promised transparency. Albanese promised to do politics differently. But in the end, we've seen a new low of mean-spirited politics, malice and retribution.